Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining today's episode. In this episode, we're talking about mainly related to data science, AI, and machine learning. Here I have with me is Dr. Rosha Pokharel. So I'm really delighted to have her here. Her passion is to solve business problems using AI and machine learning, and also how we can make it user-friendly or user-centric. So we've been trying to have this conversation for a while, I guess, right? But I'm so fortunate that I got a time to sit down and then have this conversation today. But I think this is exactly the time to have this conversation about anything related to AI ML, right? There are so many things going on. So again, I'm super excited, and I'm going to learn a lot from you as well. As I kick off the conversation, I would like to know a little bit about if you can share your journey into the data science, AI, machine learning, and what motivated you to enter into this field. That would be great. It started for the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, and it's definitely a learning opportunity for me as well while interacting with you. So it's my pleasure to be here. So speaking about my career journey into data science, I started off my journey back in my PhD days when I chose my courses that were aligned with the machine learning area, like neural nets. I had the opportunity to work with the professor Jose Principe from University of Florida, who leads the lab for computational neuroengineering. And that's where I got to do hands-on work on data science and learn the skills around data science and machine learning. And my PhD was focused on supervised machine learning algorithms. So that was my dissertation, and that's when I got to explore various machine learning algorithms and create new algorithms based on kernel methods. So
Mhm.
that's really where my journey started. Was really from the academia.
All right, that's great to know. So, in even in the machine learning or AI field, right, there are so many areas to go, right? So, what specific area you're most passionate about in AI ML, and what would be the reason for that?
So I was so during my PhD days, it was more around algorithms, and I was very much heavily focused in mathematics and
Mm-hmm.
understanding how the algorithms work. And then I decided to move from academia to industry because I wanted to learn the skills of not just building the algorithms, but making that usable to solve industry problems. And so that's when I started diving into, utilization of these algorithms to build solutions
Mm-hmm.
and solve business problems. So that's really where I get very excited about knowing that we can tell, not just that we can tell the story of a data generated by a system using data science, but can also build solutions that are more predictive in nature and apply those to solve real world problems. And in turn, it can really make the life of the users easier, and it has to also work very well with the software components that needs to wrap around these machine learning models to do that, and the user experience should also be done well in order to make it a holistic product to help the users work easier. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really where I am more passionate about, is seeing this machine learning models and data science models and solutions make the life of users better and easier.
I think that's a great way of thinking about the technology and how it can be used from the user perspective, right? So, and also you said that you actually transitioned from academia to industry. So, can you please talk a little bit about that? Like, how was the transition? Did you feel anything different coming from academia to industry, and what was the different? So, if you can share that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So it's very interesting, and I've learned a lot going from academia to industry, because while in academia, as I said, I was very much focused on algorithms and mathematics, and I did not take a good care about building my skill sets around proper programming skills, understanding what software components are and how to implement this model to actually generate value. And I did not put a lot of care about building my skills around that. So when I went to industry, I was sort of taken aback
Mm-hmm.
Here I am, kind of like coming in as an expert in machine learning because I know I can explain the algorithms, but I don't know how to put it in practice because I did not learn the tools to do that. And so I would say that it was interesting in a way because I had to learn almost from scratch the basics of software engineering, the basics of how would you go about putting this model in action, data munging, data scraping skills. All of these I had to learn, and I was fortunate that I got to learn that from some amazing software engineers that were in my team while working at Weather Company and also at IBM. So that has been an interesting journey for me, and I know we're gonna be probably talking about the career skills in the data science, but I
Yeah.
just want to touch on that. Like that's a very important skill for anybody who wants to go in the industry from academia is to keep your tools handy, sharpen them up, know what tools you need to bring your work to life. That's something that I learned the hard way, but it panned out overall.
All right, I think that's a great point for us to move actually into the skills that are required, specifically in the AI and ML side, right? So, when you think about AI, ML, data science, and so on, and if somebody wants to get into the field, what are some of the skills that they have to come up with? You think are very important?
Sure. So being in the academia, I think, it's been what I graduated in 2014, so I think that the world there has changed drastically too. But
Uh-huh.
my work was mainly in MATLAB and a little bit of Python.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
I think that as an academia, we are so much focused on publishing papers, right, and solving the equations and testing out things in our own way. So some of the tools that would be very much relevant is understanding how would you deploy a model, right? Kind of understanding the full stack side of data science is going to be important. We are given these CSV files from different sources. We're just given it in our hands, and we don't have to worry too much about scraping the data from various sources and munging the data into a better form, right? And that's another tool to gather is what are the tools that you can use to integrate
Mhm.
directly with the data sources, databases, various kinds of databases, right? SQL, NoSQL, all these sources of data and gather the data yourself. The third aspect of it is what are the tools that you can use to sort of once the model is deployed to monitor these models how would you go about verifying that what you have built using your training data set is actually going to work in the real world setting.
That's a
These
great point.
are the kind of things that I would encourage people to think about if you're going from academia to industry, because academia is very much driven towards you're given a data and you have to look into it and get a publishable worthy answer out of it, and you don't have to worry too much about putting it out into production, making it work in real world. That's the opposite side of academia and the industry, is that that's actually what you have to do.
I think that's a great point, actually. So you just talked about like end-to-end process in machine learning, right? Where you develop the model, where you get the data from, how you work with that data set, and then what kind of model is best for that data set or your particular problem, and how you deploy that. So all these things come from end-to-end process. If you think from that perspective, and that would be the way to go, building your skill rather than just focusing on just coding or something else, right? I think that's very great point. To follow this end-to-end project, I mean, end-to-end process also in AI and machine learning, right? Do you have any suggestion for a specific type of project? So if somebody wants to get understanding of this overall process, what kind of project they have to start with, or they need to follow?
Yeah. So today, AI and machine learning, data science is leveraged in several areas, right? Several
Hmm.
areas of industry, right? Healthcare, or automobile, or even general system monitoring and weather. So there are just so many variations of areas that you can dive into with data science machine learning solution. And these data, so I usually point people towards ktool.com. that has
Mm-hmm.
collection. I'm sure you've heard of it,
Yeah.
know of it, right? So that has a collection of this data sets gathered from all these various areas, and it's a really good place to dive into if you're looking for a potential use case. And then build up, like define a problem statement around prediction there, right? So once you define a problem statement around prediction using a particular data set, I think that's going to give you a good idea about what you do want to build. And I would say that always it's about framing the problem definition too. What I usually like to do is, okay, let's say you have this data and you're going to do some predictive analytics using that, but
Uh-huh.
who is the user? Like when you started off from the question of who is actually going to be using it, what's the usability of it? What's the
Mm-hmm.
viability of it? What's the value of it? And what's the feasibility of it, right? If you look at it from these four different aspects and start from the user's experience side of things, I think that's where you can walk yourself backwards towards all the way back to that data munging phase. So let's say you pick a problem statement and you start thinking about who that user is going to be and how they're going to
Mm-hmm.
be using it, you're probably going to think about, okay, this is the kind of UI I'm going to create. And
Yeah.
then what are the fields this UI is going to need is probably going to dictate what are your predictive outcomes that you're going to generate. What are your classes for prediction, or what is your predictive, Y variable, the dependent variable, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go back to, okay, what are the features that I need to create to do this, right? And then you're going to go back to, okay, what is the data set that I need to gather to create these features? I think that helps a lot if we walk backwards from the user experience.
I really like that idea actually when you said that think from the user experience perspective, right? What we are trying to achieve ultimately, right? That will definitely help you to frame the problem like right way and also use the right tool for the right objective, right? So there are so many tools, so many approaches that you can use, but if you think from that perspective, how the user going to use it and what is actually the objective for that particular project, then that will definitely help you to craft it from the beginning. I really like that idea. It seems like you've been so much into the user perspective. We also had that conversation earlier that you'd like to have something created and then something is more valued from the user perspective, right? So,
Absolutely. And just one more thing to add to that is that it's especially today with the boom of AI, and the technology has expanded so much now that people are starting to think about what is the governance aspect of it, right? What is the privacy related to it? What is the impact it's going to make on the user? So there's that side of this spectrum too, where user has to be put forefront of not just during the problem, like the solution creation, but also from the aspect of how is it going to benefit or harm the user if the solution is built. So it's very crucial to have it begin from the user's experience perspective.
definitely. And also like for all these things, like as a product, when you develop these things, right? I mean, from my experience also, I feel like coding is definitely needed part of it, right? So you gotta have some kind of coding skills so that you can build this kind of product. But at the same time, to be a good data scientist, what other skills would you think be more important in addition to coding?
Yeah, coding for sure. I mean, Python has a pretty good set of libraries that's are a lot. It's a lot useful to build almost everything of that entire spectrum that we need.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. That what goes along with it is also your ability to track your codes, like using some kind of repository like Git. Because as you know, we do so many experiments, right? We have to
Yeah.
have so many variations of our code, and having an ability to track it, merge it, fork it when you need to, and also being able to share it for others to consume. It's a very crucial skill set to have, which being in academia or being a data scientist, I've seen when I'm interviewing folks and when I'm hiring people, I've seen that
Uh-huh.
that's one of the skill that does lag in general, and I have always given that advice to people to build up on that. And myself, I did not have that skill when I
Uh-huh.
started my journey, right? So that's a really important skill to have for the individual's growth and also for that person to help others grow, right? That's the second one. And the third one is looking at it from the perspective of usability. Like you build your model now, how can you make it usable? How would you deploy it? Can you build simple API around it? I mean, what that does is that it really puts that model into the perspective of people who do not understand it, right?
Definitely.
Those people who are thinking of it as a black box, they are just looking at what is this that model can give us, right? And if you can return a response that resonates with a software engineer or the other side of that application that could integrate with it, then your conversation with them becomes very easier and you can showcase the abilities and applications of your model. So I think that's a really important skill to have. And as I said earlier, the other one is your data managing skills. It's in the real world, it's not that you're not going to come up with CSV files to give you, right? So you have to find a way to scrape the data from various sources. So sharpening up your SQL skills or NoSQL or whatever it is, the variations of skills to scrape the data is going to be very important too. So those are the kind of things I think. And then finally, the cherry on top is also being able to speak languages that resonates with people who do not understand machine learning and data science fully, right? And that takes some practice. And I myself did not have that skill when I started my career. And it's thanks to the exposure that I had with various kinds of skill sets, people coming from software engineering and user experience side of house, executives, where you'd have to sit down and explain how it works. Like those kind of experience help, but focusing on business value delivery, usability, viability, feasibility of what you are doing in your message, takes you a long way.
You touched on that too. I was thinking, right, when you talked about specifically related to the communication, I find myself also a lot of gap in between the data scientist and then the business user, right? So there is a gap of the communication when we talk about the model or the approaches. If you really focus on the technical aspect of it, then maybe that may not be easily understandable from some other folks like who are more towards the business or who have limited knowledge on the technical side of it, right? So that part of communication is very, very important, and you touched on that too. I'm glad that we are on the same page in that part of the skills, in addition to the coding and some other skills, technical skills in data science. So I wanted to touch a little bit on there has been so many things going on like AI, Chat GPT, and so on. But you already talked about a little bit on the governance side of it too, right? Like also the data security and so on. So would you mind sharing a little bit more info on that, like how we can actually work around that, like having the secure data, also data governance structure, and so on. How we can actually come up with an idea about that or a plan for that. Do you have any experience in that?
That's a challenging question. I think a lot of industry, most part of the industry is trying to solve today. I
Yeah.
think. But I would come back to, I think it has to start from the ethics built in individuals and how the practitioners of AI are, it's kind of a power that we're putting in the hands of people. And when we put that power in the hands of people to go build something and do something with the data that is coming from a system or coming from a system that is using users data, we have to ensure that there is an ethics component of it that we are gauging in individuals. I think it has to start from ensuring that when we're hiring, when we are building solutions, at every step of the way, we are putting an emphasis on the ethics of how we are doing things. Are we building something that can be harmful for individuals? And what are the repercussions of building a particular solution? Does it have any side effects on the users? Those are the kind of questions that we need to ask. The other things is also the governance committee creation, right? That's think it's also something that's being done actively across the industry is identifying the need to have an AI governance committee at not just within the industry, but across the industries as well. So that can govern, that can test these, gaps in ethics, and that can provide governance to ensure security and compliance and ethical usage of AI. So I think those are the key things.
Maybe some of the models or anybody who actually provide these kind of models, it's kind of like their limitation that how they actually handle that data, right? What is the security around it? That's always a question for any business who want to integrate that model into their system, right? So it's definitely worth to think about from the data governance side of it as well. Let's change the gear a little bit. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add to that. I think what you're touching on is that, for example, GDPR, right, that Europe issued.
Yeah.
That is a really good example of taking control of the situation and ensuring that there is privacy being looked at. So I hopefully it's evolving, and maybe there's a lot of things out there that I'm not aware of. It's very hard to catch up.
Definitely. But at least we touched on this important aspect of this AI machine learning and implementation. It's great that we touched on that governance part of it too. I want to change gear a little bit more towards beginner who are actually trying to get into the data science, or somebody who is trying to transition from some other field to the data science. There are so many paths in data science. When they say data science, right? And if you look for the job, actually, like in LinkedIn and some other places, there are so many terms that been used, like data analyst, right? Data scientist, data engineer, AI engineer, right? AI scientist. It's so many out there. Do you have any suggestion for that? How can one actually decide which one to choose from?
I would say that it's a really broad spectrum, right? As we were talking about, and yes, there are a lot of terms thrown out there today, and it's, I think, focused on which part of the spectrum that you are good at. So the data science spectrum, as I said, it goes all the way from identifying data sources, pulling data from them, and, cleaning up the data, doing some statistical analysis on it to clean it up, feature generation and engineering, and training the model, and then deploying the model, analyzing the model's outcome, deploying the model, and monitoring the model. And so this is a really broad spectrum. And I would say that for anybody who wants to get into data science, first understand what are your strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that aligns with the spectrum. Like, which part of that spectrum do your strengths align the most and are closest to? Is it software engineering? Great. Then start from the ML ops engineering in terms of deployment and build yourself up to back from there, right? Mm-hmm. Is it that data munging? Is it data analysis? Then start from data munging, data analysis, and move your path towards feature engineering and model training. Is it machine learning itself? In that case, you're in a really good spot. You are right in the middle of a spectrum, and you can work yourself on both ways. So that's how I would think about it. And is it more of analytics space, right? And that's also, I think, you're in a really good shape, because when we are working with data, and I'm sure you came from a different background, but you have a deep analytical skills because you did your PhD, and that teaches one to be very much analytical, right? So what that helps is when we look at the data and we are applying our tools in the data to gather insights, it helps us to analyze it in a way that it's a matter of learning these tools to analyze it, right? So that's also, I think, it's a really good skill that you already have if you are that, analytical. You know how to analyze data and solutions, and it's a matter of building these tools around, implementing these analysis techniques to build models or to analyze data. So just to wrap it up, I would say that identify what your strengths are, try to align it with certain aspects of this spectrum, and start from there.
Exactly. I was about to tell that as well. it also depends on what are you most interested on too, right? Some folks are more towards data analytics, like trying to understand get the insight from the data, try to understand what's the trend and so on. And some folks are more interested towards like modeling, right? They already have a statistical background. They know like what is modeling, how it works, and they want to grow up in that field, right? So in that area, probably the machine learning field would be more appropriate, right? I think you definitely laid out it pretty well based on the skills that you have or where you want to go, right? So based on that, I think you can definitely choose a path among the so many paths already out there. So not only the path, also there are so many news related to the AI, news related to the data science, and sometimes like we get a news about like AI is taking over the jobs and so on, right? And it's very hard to keep up with all of these things. So how are you able to keep up with all of these things? Do you have any resources, or do you actually look at some sort of newsletters or resources or anything so that it keeps you always updated about all this new technology and developments?
I have to be very honest. I don't think I'm most up to date. There's just so many things happening every day. It's very hard to keep track of. But I have a habit of reading 30 minutes every day in the morning about the technology advancements. And and these days it's very hard to find. It's very easy to find information in the tip of your fingertips. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. But I have to be honest. After I moved on to leadership role, it has taken away a lot of my time. That has, it's more around leadership and strategy level that I have not had the time to sharpen up my skills,
Uh,
especially with the boom of LLMs. It's just like very hard to keep up. Every day there are new models and new
yeah.
things coming up, and I don't think that I'm up to speed, but so much so what I know so far, and my best ability is to keep track of the updates is by reading every morning about it.
Sure. I mean, every day or almost every hour there is new things coming up, right? So it's very hard to keep up with these things, definitely. And I think we are also towards the end of the program too. So before we leave, anything you want to share, anything that I missed to ask about, or anything you would like to share with my viewers, or any suggestion tips, to go grow into this field. If you have any, then that would be great.
Well, first of all, and lastly, also that thank you for having me, and I think that you're doing an amazing job here, like having a full-time job yourself and still following your passion to share your knowledge and bringing the knowledge of others to share with those enthusiasts who want to get into this field. This is really an amazing job that you're doing, and thank you for doing it.
I
And
appreciate that.
secondly, yeah, and secondly, for those who are interested to get into the field, I think this is a really prime time, and don't I think it's a very exciting time, and there's a lot of skill sets needed in this, like a lot of people needed in this space, and people are coming from all different areas and fields to get into this space, and so I think it's just evolving, it's just getting started. And if you are interested, then there are a lot of resources available online to get started these days. So get started, start getting your hands dirty, and as I said, there's a lot of demand to get into this field, and I'm sure that you'll find your way.
All right. Yeah, it's great to have you here, definitely. But I wanted to ask you last question is how others can reach out to you if they want to ask anything about it. What would be the best channel for that?
You can always find me in LinkedIn. That would be the best place to find me, and
Okay.
feel free to shoot me a message, and if I can, share my what I know to
Okay.
help out, I'm happy to do that.
All right. That's great. Thank you so much for coming again. I'm so glad that we found some time to sit together and talk about this new development technology and how one can actually pursue the career in that field, right? I really appreciate your time. And again, thank you so much for joining today with me. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
All right. See you, Rosha. Bye.